Yeah, I mean, no, they're sprinters, so they run 5 minutes.
So it's funny because the daughter lives in the city. She first moved. Oh, so things, just like. No, I probably would go to Chicago.
Yeah.
So I forgot that. You know, I found that out recently.
First sprint, we did. We had another dog.
Whoa.
Sort of a beagle hound. Shepherd.
Right.
Yeah.
Your dog? Yeah. I have a little dog, and well, she's going to school now. She's 2, and she's been in school for a long time, and she's. She's a calm dog, but she doesn't have good like hand on her face. So, you know, that, so defensive around people. Oh, well, this is.
Okay, well, good evening, for coming back. Last week I talked about, my roles, my various roles in Maya Mom Weavers and Grupo Kahola, and my transition in Maya Mom Weavers from the owner to the biggest customer. And we talked a little bit about what happened with COVID, and we talked about the women developing the Guatemala market. So tonight I'm going to talk about the challenges that Grupo Cajola and Maya Mom Weavers and Tejedores Maya Mom have to become self-sustainable. And I use that word self-sustainable carefully because I don't want you to think about sustainable meaning for the earth and for people. We do want to work in that way. We respect the people that we work with. We respect the environment. But what I want to talk about tonight is self-sustainability, which means that we have organizations and businesses that generate enough revenue so that they can stay ongoing, so they can keep surviving. So Grupo Cajola and Maya Mom Weavers exist because they had access to some private funding and to lots of volunteer time. Eduardo and his family contribute land and buildings. I contribute time and financial support. And this has allowed us to grow organically, responding to the needs and interests of the community rather than being beholden to the funders who are going to have their own objectives and their own timetable and their own So we've been able to do things like, oh, we need another loom, we need a sewing machine, let's build a chicken coop. We've been able to do that after we made the decision without having to see if there were funders that were very interesting. But ultimately, these organizations have to be able to sustain themselves, provide for paid employment, and provide for financial wherewithal that they'll keep going. And one of the biggest challenges is Eduardo and I, who have to change our roles from movers and shakers to pass that on so other people can carry that on. So I'm going to start with the issue of land. Land is very important to us. And in Kaho'ula land, the system of land is very patriarchal. The head of the family, the male head of the family, is the one who owns the land, and he passes that land on to his sons. Although I will say in these past years, there are more men that are also passing on some land to their daughters as well. The size of families in Kaho'ula has traditionally been very large. So over the generations, as they pass that land on, those plots get smaller and smaller. And land nowadays is used primarily for housing or commercial interests. So the amount dedicated to agriculture has gotten smaller and smaller as well. When I first arrived in Kaho'ula in 2005, where I lived was one house, and then everything else was cornfield. Now, whatever, 18 years later, there's a lot of houses. I could even say in some parts, dense houses. And then there's a cornfield here and there. In the center of Kaho'ula, we still have a handful of cornfields, but I imagine in the next few years, they'll be disappeared as well. So the land that we have, so Eduardo built his house, or when I got to Kaho'ula in 2005, I went to the house that Eduardo had built for him while he was in the United States. And I started to use different rooms for different activities. But the house that is Eduardo's is built on land that still belongs to his father. So his father has told the sons which plots of land they have, and they've built their houses, but it still doesn't belong to them. So when Eduardo returned to Kaho'ula with his mission to organize Grupo Kaho'ula, the first thing he did was build the second, it's really the third floor, but the second floor you see there on his house, so we could have meetings. It's a large meeting room, or was a large meeting room. And then from that time on, we're always running out of space. So the first thing that happened was, so on the other side of the house, there's a house that was built by, a small house built by Habitat for Humanity many years ago. So that house has become a part of, like, the base of our school. There used to be, between the Habitat house and Eduardo's house, there used to be a grassy field. And I used to have my women's organizing meetings in that grassy field. And now that's also become part of the school. So right now, the building is home to Maya Mom Weaver, Tejedores, Maya Mom, to the school, to Grupo Kaho'ula, and to our internet center. So well, not the internet anymore. It's called Computer Lab. After the pandemic, we did not restart our internet center, mostly because we were no longer the only internet center in town. You could go other places and get that service. And because an internet center in Kaho'ula is not a viable business, so in order to have income from it, you need to couple it with some sort of a business activity. So what we did was stop having an internet center, and we changed our internet center manager into the coordinator of technology and communications. And this has been a really great change because it was the first time somebody could take a look at all of our projects and what technology needs they have. The first thing he did was a survey to find out what people's needs were, and the biggest need was for training. So here, all of our teachers didn't have competence, none of our teachers had competence on Word or Excel. And so he's been teaching all of them in the time since he started with this part of the project. And then last year, he started teaching the 5th and 6th graders from our learning center to use the computers. And this is really important, I'm sure you understand, in this day and age. And the school system really fails the kids in that. Even if a school has computers, they're not used in the classroom. Perhaps they're not even connected. And if they are connected, they're not used in the classrooms. So you have this whole generation and this whole environment of technology who don't have any experience. So that's really very important. So on our learning center, after or during the pandemic, first they shut down, as you might remember. Then they started to work to hold the program again, but in open air. And then we moved out of open air into a couple of rented houses that weren't in very good repair, but at least they could maintain their social distancing. But now the learning center takes the space that originally were chicken houses in front of Eduardo's father's house. And we have another 3 classrooms that are in space in a house built by an immigrant who lives still in Atlanta. And he rents us the space to have 3 of our classes so that his family also gets a little bit of earnings from that. And in 2021, Grupo Cajola started paying rent to Eduardo's father for our building that the Weavers use. And then last year, we started paying rent to Eduardo's father for the learning center classes. And so little by little, we're trying to recognize the resources that used to be contributed so that we can move towards this self-sustainability. Although Grupo Cajola was originally formed by Eduardo and a friend in the United States, it was Eduardo alone who came back to Grupo Cajola and formed Grupo Cajola in Cajola. So he's been the primary driving force there. He has been paid a salary since he came there. And I have been the one who's been primarily financing our projects along with donations from people that I solicit in the United States. An important step towards sustainability has been the development of our board of directors in Cajola and our board that is recently created in the United States. In Cajola, there was a board of directors from the very beginning because that's a required part of organizing a nonprofit association. But really, during most of the beginning years, our board was in name only. They didn't really get involved in making decisions. But some years ago, we recognized it was time for them to start making decisions. And so we started to work with that board to make decisions. It's been a long process because there aren't any models in Cajola of boards that work like our board works, which is to look and see what's best for the community. So the boards in Cajola tend to be populated by people who think being on the board is so they can take the personal advantage of whatever the project happens to be. So it's taken a while to get this idea of that it's a decision-making body. However, I think the board we have now, I think is about the 3rd one. They each have 2-year terms. It's about the 3rd one that has been really making decisions. And in fact, the board that we have now is particularly strong. And so I'm very optimistic they're setting like a pattern, a model for the future. we will be, or the group will be electing a new board in February. And so part of the work the board is going to be doing this year is planning how we can execute that transition to make sure the next board is also very strong. And in 2021, I invited people to be on the board of directors, and we created a nonprofit here in the United States. That's been a good step towards self-sustainability because it's helped divide Grupo Kahala from my personal identity. But the real trigger for organizing the board here was that we need a nonprofit in order to do the significant fundraising that we're going to have to be doing for our new community school. So the biggest challenge for the Tejedores Mayamam is to become a legal entity. They are informally, we call them a cooperative. It's just an informal group right now. So Eduardo created a sole proprietorship with the tax authorities in Guatemala because sometimes we need to issue an official tax invoice to somebody. The small businesses in Guatemala tend to run their businesses with a mix of legal and off the books kinds of transactions. For example, if you went to buy yarn, the vendor will ask you, do you want an invoice with a tax invoice, or do you want just a receipt? And so the differences in the two is the 12% value added tax. And so we have customers they have customers that need to, that ask to be invoiced with tax invoices. So we use Eduardo's sole proprietorship, which is called Mayamam Distributor, as that source. That's not a good long-term thing, so we want to legalize the group. So I said they're informally organized as a cooperative because of making decisions collectively. However, when I went to review the law for forming a cooperative, I discovered why the cooperatives in Guatemala are organized the way they are. Because the law forbids anyone who's a member of the cooperative from earning money from the cooperative. So that model doesn't work for us. So the alternative is to organize as a nonprofit association, which is the same structure that Grupo Kahala in Kahala has. So that's it's a problem, not because it's nonprofit, but it's a problem because in order to organize it, we need a majority of the women to accept the responsibility to be the owners of their own business. And although I assumed it was going to be a logical thing they wanted, when we broached the subject a little more than a year ago, the women who have coordinator roles were perfectly interested in doing it, but the other women were not, and I think they're a little bit afraid. And so what we have to be doing now, well, I'm more optimistic now because there's more of the women who are taking coordinator roles, and because when I go to Kahala and I sit in on a monthly meeting, I see that more of the women are really involved and listening and know what's going on. So I'm optimistic that sometime this year we'll be able to get their agreement to do that, because that will be a very important step. Another area that the Tejedores Mayamam needs to work on is increasing their sales. The logical place for them to increase their sales is to go to the European market and to the Latin American market. The European market is a logical place to go because Europe has been more interested in fair trade for long before it was interesting here in the United States. And in the States, we do have inquiries and we have sold things to fair trade organizations, but we're not the best people to do that because the products we have in New Jersey have already added the cost of shipping and marketing. And so if the Tejedores Mayamam could develop that market, they would be able to have, I think, more opportunities because their products will be less expensive. a problem right this minute with that is that the economies in Europe are under a lot of pressure, and I don't think they're going to be ready to have new things going on for a while. Another area for them to develop in order to approach these markets is they need a real website so they can put all their products and all their pricing up on the website. There is a small amount of online sales going on in Guatemala, not like it is here, but at least a little bit. So it would be good for them to have a website in order to be able to reach that market. And the last area, excuse me, that they really need in order to expand their sales is some new product development targeted towards the Latin American market. And as you know, they're excellent seamstresses and they're excellent weavers, but they don't really have that skill of product development in spite of the FundUp training. And so I think they're going to need to look for some professional help to target the Latin American market with products. The products that we sell in the States and the products they sell in Guatemala, there's a big overlap. But I am sure that Latin American market has some things that could be put into their product range. And last, my Mom weavers in the United States. Our biggest challenge to move to self-sustainability is really to convert all our volunteer positions into paid positions. So I'm the operations manager. I'm a volunteer. My husband is the shipping director. He's a volunteer. It is my daughter, Jennifer, who is our marketing manager. She is paid, but she's probably not paid what she should be paid if she was in the open market. And our creative director, Robin, who is part-time volunteer, should be replaced by a full-time creative director, because right now, Robin is responsible for brand identity, for new product development, making marketing materials, doing the visuals for the website, and doing things that if she could do it on a full-time basis, if we had somebody to do it on a full-time basis, would allow us to expand and strengthen our brand against the competition. So Jennifer, Robin and I have a dream of finding a Guatemalan American person to take these roles one day. That would be very cool. So the short-term answer for us is in making more money or creating more funds is more sales, of course. I told you that we had been on a good trajectory, but that beginning last year it had really leveled off. So we're still trying to figure out which sales strategies we can use to build our sales. And we are, and along with increasing sales, when we're trying to triple our sales, along with increasing the income coming from those sales, it would really help a really huge cost of ours, which is the cost of importing. So now we import products from Cajola every other month, and we're paying about $5 a pound for those products to come in. If we could get to a more economical level, we could cut that rate in half. So there's a lot of motivations for getting the sales up. So a minor detail, everything is worked out of my own house right now, which is not a sustainable model. And so the next goal would be to move into a warehouse. We're actually not that far from that, but to move into a warehouse, which would mean getting a paid person to run the warehouse and do the shipping. And the last thing confronting Maya Mom weavers in the United States is we also need an organizational strategy, because Maya Mom weavers is my own sole proprietorship, and we'll need some kind of a different organizational structure for it to have longevity. So I don't know whether we would become an LLC, whether we would become a small corporation, or maybe even the Tejedor's my imam would be able to open up a branch here in the United States. So that's our last remaining question mark. And that's all I have to say today. And I invite you back next week to hear about the lessons I've learned on this journey of civic engagement. Question?
Did you ever, maybe a B Corp? And there's a lot of rules to become.
We have to be yes, well, we have to be a lot bigger to be a B
You have to
Corp.
be bigger.
But no, that if we were a corporation, we would be a B, we would, I assume, try to be a B Corp, yes.
I feel your pain though, and the growing pains, and
Yeah,
finding people, moving from volunteerism to paid employees is.
it's a big
hurdle.
deal, right?
Yeah, but-
This takes money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there any movement towards women owning property in Kahola?
just this, that some fathers are handing down to their daughters. And so there are cases of it. One of our weavers owns her property because her husband borrowed money from his in-laws to take the trip north and pledged what was his house to her father. And he had very bad luck and didn't make it. And so the father claimed the house and gave it to his daughter. So she owns it. So it is not uncommon, it's not impossible, it's still not the common. And in Eduardo's family, we don't need to deal with that because there's no daughters. So it was a moot point. They were all sons, so. And Eduardo only has daughters, so he's going to be passing them on to women.
I'd like to hear more about the technology. That was interesting. Well, when I remember you have a center here in your house. You had a computer
Right.
center too, right?
Yes.
And
A long time ago, I did, right.
okay. Oh, no longer.
No.
So you were talking about that center in Tahoe.
Our computer lab, right.
And so this is recent thing that you just hired this coordinator.
Well, he was the internet manager and he was pre-pandemic, but it's just that we reallocated his services. And I don't know why we didn't think of it earlier because there was some equipment, some places to do something, but he really was able to step back and take a look at it. And also he can make a technology plan of what we need to do. But they needed more than equipment, they needed training. So, I mean, it's really startling when you look at it. So this past year, their accomplishment was, I said, because the first year he was training the teachers, when the preschool made their budget, they did their whole budget on Word. So I said, please teach them Excel so they can do their budget on Excel. And they did, so it was better. So, but anyway, it's just we're so accustomed to using it without batting an eyelash. And for them, it's not like that, so.
Well, so how would you characterize, the access that people have,
To a computer?
Yeah, I mean, how generally.
To computers, not very good access
Yeah.
without going to an internet center.
Right, and
They all have access to the internet now because of the smartphones, but that's not the same as working on a computer.
No.
And so
and how much does some of that cost, I wonder?
a computer?
Phones, access, and versus going to, how much would it cost to go to an internet center?
It doesn't cost much to go on internet. That's why it's hard to make a business out of it. So I mean, the cost
Okay.
for using the computer, it's very low. So that's not the problem. In fact, when we had the internet center, a lot of times it was just kids coming to play games, which was not exactly ideal. But it's just definitely way behind overall in the technology. And then when the kids go to college, they have to use the computers and stuff, so.
And so the public schools, you said there's just really nothing going on there. Wow.
Not in Kahola. I mean, not there's no computers, there's
Right.
just no computers being integrated into the
And
curriculum.
that's because there's not enough money. or.
Yeah, there's no money, right,
Nobody.
yeah, so it is a big deficit.
It's not an amazing contribution that they can have the training.
I mean, it's not huge, it's a few people have some training, but it's something, right? And even with the grade school, the 5th and 6th graders, that's not a ton of kids, it's a few kids that have this chance, but at least it's a few kids going through with more capacity, so.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I was thinking about like in Brazil, they kind of skipped over all the, the lines, the phone lines and that kind of stuff because.
Yeah, we did too, right?
Yeah,
We don't have phone lines, right?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing, people in the middle of the Amazon can get, get service, where here, if you're in a remote place, you might be lucky. I mean, you can go to Warwick and not get a signal, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's interesting, I'm curious about that, what the quality of the signals is.
Right. Well, the quality of phone signals is actually pretty good now. It wasn't always, but it is now. But that's a big change in technology. So when I first started going to Cajola, there was no phone. When Eduardo left home in 1996, there was nothing. His mother was somebody from the neighboring San Juan Ostuncalco came to her one day and said, your son is going to call from the States tomorrow. If you come, you can talk to him for a half an hour or whatever. When I was there, they had a radio phone. And then the cell phones started coming in. And our first internet center was satellite based. But that was the only way. It had to be satellite based. So, but now it's not. It's like the same system like we have here. The signal based, not cable, but signal based. So. No, that's why it was such a challenge when the schools went virtual. How can you? How can you do that, right? Other questions, curiosities, ready to go and study, ready to go to have your class. All right, sorry.
I was looking on your website because I need to buy a baby gift. And I saw you have bibs.
And baby balls.
And I wasn't sure, I looked for it, and I'm gonna buy something.
Cool.
This big.
Well, I know who you are,
Maybe
so.
they have this little wrap.
They have the bibs, I saw, but
Yeah,
were those maybe more kind of products, babies?
we're trying. They've been popular so far. So.
Yeah. No, this.
We have toys for dogs too.
These dogs are really destructive.
We have really good tug toys that I'm sure will last longer than most.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
And they're upcycled, right?
A sustainable dog toy making club on campus.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, they're
I
making
just saw a
beds.
flyer for it, I was like, wow, what a great.
Dark
club.
beds.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Some of my students volunteer for them, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Hang in there, the semester's almost over. Next week is the last class, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, thank God, that's.
Huh? Yeah, right.
That is still.
Okay, what am I doing here? I want to stop recording.